The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Let's welcome Delegate Ben Cline, who's Vice Chair of the Finance Committee in the House of Delegates. Good to see you.
Always good to be with you, Woody.
And Delegate Steve Landis, who's Chairman of Education in the House of Delegates. Good to see you, sir.
Woody, good to be here.
Also a member of the Appropriations Commission, and we have a budget before us with a fairly significant hole. Tell us how we're doing.
Well, soon the House will get the budget from the Appropriations Committee, who has to report out on Sunday. And we've got a $1.2 billion shortfall, so that means the governor has proposed certain actions. Actually, the Finance Committee that Ben serves on is dealing with some legislation related to that. And then we take a look at what they have, and then we try to set the priorities or reorder the priorities based on what the governor has sent to us. And I think we'll do that, and I think we'll have something that the majority of the House members and hopefully the citizens will agree with.
So give us an order of magnitude. That 1.5 billion compares to what the total budget is?
The biennial budget that we're working under now is about $104 billion. So that's about $52 billion a year.
Great. And you're working on the Finance Committee on some of these issues as well.
Right. The House of Delegates splits the money committees into two. Finance deals with revenues, and then Appropriations deals with expenditures. So we're trying to make sure that there are enough revenues to address all the needs of the Commonwealth. Our governor made some promises he couldn't keep last year when he promised raises if revenues met certain points, and they didn't meet those benchmarks. So we're looking at revenues, possibly scaling back some of the tax credits that Virginia offers, and making sure that there's enough revenue to hopefully meet Virginia's priorities: public safety, education, making sure that our state employees are adequately compensated. So we've got a tall order ahead of us, but I'm optimistic we're going to meet it and get out on time, on budget, with a balanced budget.
Great. Public safety is very important to the Commonwealth and its residents, and that's one of the areas that you're focusing on in terms of pay raises for state employees, is it not?
We are. We're looking at pay raises for state employees, especially dealing with our state police and the shortage and the difficulties we're having in recruiting and keeping troopers in Virginia. We'll be looking at state-supported employees as well. And then we're going to look at providing probably additional money for K through 12, but we're going to provide it in a way that provides flexibility to the local school systems, so they could use it for a teacher pay raise if they wanted to, or for other operating expenses that they may have. The governor promised that he was going to give a pay raise bonus. The problem with the way he structured that is the local governments would have to match that, and many of them don't have the resources to do that. So what we've tried to do is come up with a better mechanism to provide the flexibility through the lottery funding formula.
So there are no strings attached in terms of that lottery funding if that occurs?
That's exactly right. And of course, the Appropriations Committee would have to approve that mechanism, and that's one of the things we'll be considering. Then the House would have to agree as well.
To tell us why it's important that especially our public safety employees get a raise. I understand that they're woefully undercompensated right now. They're being stolen, not in a pejorative sense, by local jurisdictions as well as jurisdictions outside of the state of Virginia.
Well, that's true, and everybody knows how important public safety is, and our state troopers do a great job. But we have to make sure that there's not chronic turnover, and they're not leaving, being enticed to go to work for jurisdictions that offer more pay, better benefits, more stability. So we want them to be adequately compensated. So what the Chairman of Appropriations has talked about is providing a good sized pay raise for those state troopers to make sure that they can recruit and retain the best possible.
Now, talk to us a little bit more about those tax credits, because there are a lot of those that appear in the tax code. It must be difficult, however, to just deal with one versus a comprehensive approach, I take it.
It is, and that's why we have a commission to review all of our tax preferences in a comprehensive manner. I'm on that. And I'm trying to do the same thing from a regulatory standpoint with our professional occupations like plumbers and electricians and hairdressers, barbers, cosmetologists. All of the hours that they have to get are often too many for people who are trying to get into a small business or things like that. So reviewing them in a comprehensive manner, just like we review our tax credits, is a bill that I've introduced that's gone up to appropriations. Hopefully we'll be able to fund.
So how does the Commonwealth create an environment that will encourage entrepreneurship, less dependence upon the largesse of the federal government?
Well, Woody, that's one of the big issues we've been dealing with the last couple of years. You know, obviously we've talked about in the past, and we have incentives for programs, but as Ben said, having a limited regulatory environment for the business community so they can operate, especially small businesses and startup and entrepreneur businesses, cannot afford a lot of additional regulations and rules. So efforts like Ben's and others, in addition to the incentives that we provide, I've got two bills that deal with adjusting some of our small business job grant fund and our small business investment fund that helps just small businesses. So we're really trying to target that sector of the economy. That's where job growth is. 75% of all jobs are created in the small business sector. And so we're working along those lines. We're also looking at reviewing our Virginia Economic Development Partnership. We got a JLARC report on that. There were a lot of challenges, a lot of problems, so you're going to see an effort, bipartisan effort, both the House and Senate and the administration in trying to solve the challenges we have there. And that is our system that recruits and markets economic development for our localities, our regions, and the Commonwealth.
A pretty scathing report, I take it, from JLARC about that partnership.
That's what we understand. I mean, just take the example of Appomattox, where the governor went so far as to recruit and welcome in and offer a great deal of money to a Chinese firm that turned out not to exist and took the money and ran. And so we need some controls and some accountability in the Economic Development Partnership. The governor has proposed moving more into the executive branch, which is exactly the wrong direction. So we'll hopefully be passing some legislation to reform and improve the EDP going forward.
You talked about relieving small businesses of regulation. You have a particular bill dealing with professional and occupational licensing requirements. Is that what you were talking about?
Exactly. When someone trying to break into a small business, break into an area like hairdressing, trying to rent a barber chair, save enough money to get into a small business environment, paying to have to get the training, the hours necessary to keep up your license and to get your license in the first place often can be prohibitive. So what we need to do is to review all of the different occupational regulations that are covered by DPOR, the Department of Occupational Regulation, and see if any can be reduced, because the numbers of hours required have been going up and up and up, and people have been, it's been harder for people to get into small businesses.
Delegate Landis, the foundation to attract new businesses and to sustain them is to have an educated workforce. You're chairman of the Education Committee. What is your committee doing in that regard?
Well, Woody, in the last couple of years, we've really looked at trying to improve and expand the opportunities for our young people so that they can keep up with the jobs for the 21st century. Working with the community colleges is important as well. Some of the things that we're looking at this year specifically are providing some additional reforms and choices for parents. There's an education savings account legislation that Delegate LaRocque has that is a great reform, would allow students, especially challenged students, to be able to have options where they are able to go to school based on kind of what their needs are and what their parents would like. We've got a virtual education bill that Delegate Dickey Bell has that would set up a virtual school system statewide for students that are in military families where they travel a lot. They're posted different parts, not only around Virginia, but across the nation. That would be a great option. And for students that are looking for additional challenged opportunities that maybe are not getting those in their local school system. And then we're looking at one of the pieces of legislation I have is setting up a regional school division for charter schools and have the Board of Education do that. And that's just some of the options. But in addition to that, one of the most important things we're looking at in the next 2 years is a redesign of high school. So the concept is the last 2 years of high school, young people that want to go out and take advantage of a career in technical field, they would be able to get a credential, maybe have an apprenticeship. For kids that are going to go to college, they take additional AP courses. So maybe they would have their first year of college already completed by the time they graduate from high school. Or to do a dual enrollment classes with the community college for additional certification or credentialing. So those opportunities are going to be there in the future.
I take it that all of these opportunities would be welcome in your district and for your constituents.
Absolutely. We represent very rural districts, and so providing additional options for them is very important for us. I've become chief co-patron of legislation with our majority leader, Kirk Cox, to establish an authority governing online education opportunities for higher ed. A lot of colleges and universities in our system are putting cameras at the back of the classroom and broadcasting their classes and offering online courses as a way to bring down the cost and expand opportunities for more people to take advantage of higher education.
Now, these educational savings accounts that you mentioned, it's a great idea, but what are we going to do to encourage more charter schools? You mentioned charter schools. I think there are 6 or 7 in the Commonwealth. I think the national average statewide is 120. How are we going to increase the number of charter schools?
Well, providing more information to folks about opportunities that charter schools provide, encouraging those charter schools from Richmond to provide that alternative for families and for folks in struggling school districts. We have some school districts where some kids are really trapped in failing schools, and we have to provide them with alternatives. The educational scholarships are one opportunity, but charter schools provide another alternative, and if the school division wants to move in that direction, we want to be supportive.
I take it there's a real bottleneck at the local level, however, in terms of chartering charter schools.
Woody, the challenge is the Constitution vests authority for public education in the State Board of Education and the local school boards. And the challenge is for charter schools to really be effective, the state board needs to be able to expand or provide those opportunities. The regional school division charter schools that my bill envisions would have the state board working with the local school divisions in areas that have the problems that Ben mentioned, where they're not achieving, where they're having schools that are not even being accredited. And that's just another option. It would allow those students a better opportunity to succeed.
Dyslexia is a subject that you're involved with this session in terms of our public schools. Talk to us about that.
Right. In terms of K-12, there is no greater challenge than getting children to read and engage at an early age. And for those children who have dyslexia, identifying it, being able to develop a teaching system to it is one of the greatest challenges. So last year we created training requirements for teachers to identify signs of dyslexia in kids at an early age. So now incoming teachers will have that training, but this year I have a bill to ensure that there's a point of contact in every school division so that if teachers or parents have questions about dyslexia, that they can go to a reading specialist to get their questions answered and help diagnose at an earlier age so we can make sure they're on the right track going forward.
Great. What about student discipline? There's been significant dialogue and discussion around that, the length of discipline, the use of school resource officers who sometimes refer kids to the criminal justice system. Talk to us about that.
There are several pieces of legislation this year. Delegate Dickey Bell and then Senator Stanley have companion pieces to look at reforming, if you will, the suspension, discipline measures that local school systems have. We haven't heard those bills yet, but they're going to be heard soon in the Education Committee, the House Education Committee, and I think they're moving forward on the Senate side as well. So we'll be taking a look at those. But my understanding is they're going to reform the process so that there's more protection for the student, and that school systems are not just using the discipline and suspensions as a mechanism not to try to educate the young people. I think most school systems do a pretty good job and they utilize that very sparingly. But sometimes you do have to discipline a student, and we want to maintain that balance and see if we can make some improvements as well.
Any particular problems in your district, especially in the rural areas in terms of our public schools?
We have great public schools in the Valley and around rural Virginia, and the teachers are outstanding. I think that making sure that we can recruit and retain the best teachers in our schools, it's always a challenge. So we've done our best to continue to make sure pay keeps pace with the cost of inflation. I think Virginia teachers are compensated at about the middle of the scale nationally, and so making sure that our kids have a great environment and a safe environment to go to school is important.
Now, what about agriculture and forestry in the rural area of your district? We know that's a significant economic driver statewide. What about your district?
Oh, it's the biggest industry in Virginia, and we are the breadbasket in the Shenandoah Valley. So, supporting our farm families is one of our top issues when we come down here, and we make sure that in terms of legislation that that nothing happens to inhibit our farm families and make sure that they can continue to survive and thrive.
Higher education, something else that you're very much focused on, especially in terms of who populates the Board of Trustees or Board of Visitors of our institutions of higher learning. Talk to us about some of the legislation that you are pursuing in that regard.
Woody, I have a bill that would require, if signed into law, that the rector and the vice rector of all of our institutions of higher learning be Virginia residents. The vast majority of the board members are Virginia residents, but there seems to be, I think, a disconnect sometimes with board members and boards of visitors that they have a shared responsibility not just to the institution, but to the citizens of Virginia and the Commonwealth of Virginia. So this is a modest measure to try to maybe provide that accountability a little bit more, at least for those two officers, and the realization that if you're a taxpayer of Virginia, you're going to understand the challenges that the average Virginian has.
So has that passed the House yet?
It has passed the House, and it will go on over to the Senate. My understanding is there's a version on the Senate that is on its way as well.
Matter of fact, crossover date is fast approaching. What's the significance of that?
Well, crossover means the House has to complete all of the work on House bills, and the Senate has to complete all the work on Senate bills, and then we cross over. All the House bills go over to the Senate, and vice versa.
Now, have your bills, have the bills that you are pursuing passed the House yet?
Some have, and some are in the process of making their way through committees, and hopefully we'll get a good number going over there. Not all of them make it. I think that one of the important things we do, just as important as putting legislation out there and passing it, is stopping bad legislation from happening. So one of the things, especially in courts of justice, we have to do is look critically at what some of these bills are doing, and making sure that the code, especially for lawyers, continues to provide a steady guide forward.
Now, you have a proposal dealing with health benefits. Talk to us about that.
Well, one of the important issues right now is health care, and watching what's happening at the federal level. My constituents are asking what we can do to help lower the cost of health care. Delegate Landis has an important bill dealing with contracting directly with physicians, and I have a bill enabling Virginians to purchase health insurance from out of state so that competition can be improved, making sure that if you can't find a plan in Virginia that suits your needs, you can go get one that's affordable.
Tell us a little bit more about your bill that would allow the contracting directly with physicians.
It's a simple concept. Basically, for individuals that have high deductible plans or looking for additional options, it would allow the patient to contract directly with the doctor or a practice for certain services. For instance, if they wanted to have 3 doctor's appointments a year for preventive care, they would contract for that and there'd be a set fee. It would also allow employers, especially small businesses, who would provide that type of benefit to their employees, and maybe they're offering a high deductible plan because that's all they can afford for their employees, as an additional benefit, so that the doctor or practice could contract directly with the employer as well. So I think it's a great reform. It's a simple measure. It's just a contract between the doctor and the patient or the employer, and it just also states that it's not health insurance.
And your background as a prosecutor, I think, led you to another piece of legislation dealing with stalking.
Right. Domestic violence is a major problem in Virginia, and I'm proud to have created several new laws that crack down on domestic violence and strangulation, stalking, things like that. This bill creates new third offense penalty for crimes involving either violations of protective orders or stalking, so new felonies to make sure that people who commit these crimes receive justice.
Back to healthcare, I noticed yesterday there was a presentation made on the floor about the opioid heroin issue. I think there were 3 examples used. I won't go through those unless you want to talk about those, but obviously that's a significant problem in the Commonwealth and nationwide, and I know the General Assembly is addressing all those issues.
We are. Delegate Pillion and others have really taken the lead. It's a real problem in Southwest Virginia, and that's why the members of the Southwest delegation have really taken the lead, and with Delegate Pillion. But basically what we're trying to do is come up with a series of pieces of legislation that will deal with the doctors and the training that how and when they provide that type of medication for pain, and on the end result, trying to make sure that we're also not having those medications out where people can get them unless they absolutely need to have them for the purposes of pain medication for chronic pain and injury and the like. And what's happening is young people and individuals are prescribed legitimately these opioids for pain, and then they get hooked on them. And then it leads to other problems with heroin and other drug use, and that's why we're trying to deal with this epidemic.
So it's a criminal justice issue. It's also a health-related issue. Talk to us about the pros and cons of that.
Absolutely. When you deal with prescription-related crimes, all too often the individuals who are committing the crimes are trapped in an addictive posture, and you want to provide them with the help they need while also making sure that the laws are followed. So that balance is something that we struggle with on a regular basis, and from issues like drug courts to issues related to deferring convictions and possibly dismissing crimes, making sure that they get counseling under what's called the first offender statute. Those are all drug-related programs that we have in Virginia to make sure that while we're enforcing the laws, we also help with recovery.
Yeah, these are real sad stories. I believe one related to a baby Lucy, whose mother became addicted to opioids, and when that baby was born, that baby had to be taken away from the mother, for example, for treatment. Then there was someone a young man who had been involved in an automobile accident, serious neck injury, and became addicted to opioids, and then moved to heroin. Apparently heroin is fairly cheap these days.
That's what the real problem is, and as Ben was saying, it's trying to provide the services for the person that has become addicted, and to make sure that they're recovering and that they no longer need the medication from the standpoint of the addiction. But on the front end, it's as I mentioned, it's also making sure medical professionals know when and what to look for as alternatives to opioids from the standpoint of pain medication, whether someone really needs that medication or not, because the evidence is It's very addictive, and when somebody utilizes that medication, it has to be monitored closely and in limited cases.
And I believe now the medical professionals are now stepping up to the plate, admitting that maybe they made some mistakes in terms of prescribing opioids a little bit too much, and they've contributed to this epidemic.
It sounds like they are acknowledging that fact, and it's an effort that's going to involve everybody from physicians to law enforcement to the families and the counselors. We'll all get there, but it's proving to be one of our tougher challenges.
Now, about 10% of the population of the Commonwealth is comprised of veterans. I know you probably have veterans in your district.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about why they are so important to the Commonwealth and the kinds of programs we have to assist them.
Well, the men and women who have served our country are our greatest asset, and we have done our best to make sure that Virginia is one of the most veteran-friendly states in the country. We not only ensure that when dealing with the federal system, there's that ease of access, but also making sure that we have a state system that supplements that. So we have new veterans facilities being constructed across the Commonwealth. We have funding that is going to the ones in our part of Virginia to make sure that those who served our country are well treated. Absolutely.
And the Virginia Values Veterans Program has been very successful. It's provided a boost for veterans who are seeking employment. How important is that program?
That's very important, Woody, for young men and women that are coming out of the military, young veterans especially, that are looking for job opportunities. That really helps match up their skills, the things that they learned with their military service, and how that can be applied to in the workforce. We're also looking at, through training with the community colleges and our higher education institutions, again, really trying to work and helping the veterans find that match for their skills and their interest in what job or career that they're looking for as well. And they have the greatest background and obviously have had dedication to the country and the state. We want to provide them those job opportunities. And a lot of the skills that they have learned in the military are really applicable to some of the emerging growth areas we have in our economy.
Last word, 30 seconds. What about veterans courts?
Oh, veterans courts are an area we're looking into. The ability of a court to fashion its docket so that when they're dealing with a number of veterans cases involving veterans who may have gotten in trouble with the law and need help with either addiction or other types of challenges, we can help them.
Thanks. Good to see you both. Good luck in the remainder of the session.
Thanks, Woody.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.